My name is Joao Pacheco. I'm a senior fellow at Farm Europe. And Farm Europe is a think tank on agricultural policies in Brussels. Now, this is a joint Farm Europe and USDA initiative. USDA doesn't need any presentations. It's the US Department of Agriculture. And we have a clear purpose today. It's to start a dialogue on the sustainability of agriculture on both sides of the Atlantic. There are certainly different practices, traditions, ways of doing farming between the United States and the European Union, but there is agreement on the need for sustainability on three dimensions: environmental, social, and economic. So that will be the theme of this webinar. Now, very quickly, a practical outline for everybody attending and being with us today. We'll have three panels. In the first panel, we'll have two high-level speakers. I will introduce them briefly, followed by two senior officials, and then followed by two farmers and representatives of farming organizations. We'll have questions and answers after the first panel, after the high-level speakers, and then a second set of questions and answers at the very end. And please use the Zoom facility to put forward your questions. So as time is short, I'll pass immediately to the first panel and to the presentations of the two high-level speakers. It's a great honor to have both Mr. Norbert Lins. He is the chair of the European Parliament Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. Thank you for accepting and being with us today, Mr. Lins. And then also Ms. Ted McKinney. You serve as the USDA Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agricultural Affairs. A honor to have you with us also today. So without further ado, may I ask you, Mr. Lins, to take the floor for your comments, for your words?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation, dear Mr. Pacheco, dear Mr. McKinney, dear Mr. Basco, Mr. Hutchins, Ms. Zifuru, and Mr. Hakewood. Ladies and gentlemen, by 2050, it is estimated that the world population will reach 10 billion people. That is a lot of hungry mouths to feed. As the world population continues to grow, we are all faced with the common challenge of how to produce enough food while maintaining the health of the environment. The US and the EU certainly agree on the fact that sustainability plays a major role to protect the environment. However, the new farm-to-fork strategy in Europe has caused a debate on how to bring sustainability, competitiveness, and food safety together. I'm happy that we can discuss our different and common ideas on how to do this. With great interest, I have read the article by US Secretary Sonny Perdue on how Europeans forgot about their farmers. While I agree with his analysis, I would phrase it differently. The farm-to-fork strategy cannot provide a solid approach for nowadays challenge, since it focuses too much on the farm part in farm-to-fork and forgets about a fair burden sharing from all actors. In my opinion, we need 5 key aspects to balance both the needs to ensure the production of economic and affordable food and food security, and the need to be sustainable and protect the environment. First, all actors have to be involved. The strategy can only be a success if all actors have the feeling to be included and that their input is valued. In this, the US and I seem to agree. The farmers need to be more heard and included. Secondly, the strategy needs to be based on science, implying the strategy to be scientific policy making. Especially today with COVID-19, a long overdue impact assessment diving into the aspects of food security, quality, and income stability is necessary. In this sense, I agree to the US point of view that the strategy should be based on real agricultural science instead of, so to say, political science. It is my belief that without science, the strategy remains just a nice to have paper, lacking truthworthiness and seriousness. Furthermore, and thirdly, I think that market-driven solutions are key to find a strategy that takes into account the economic dimension of this challenge. In this sense, the strategy should focus on target corridors and incentives rather than obligations and fixed targets, which provides flexibility in extreme situations such as climate-related changes. Another very important aspect refers to technology, my fourth point. Farmers need the right tools to shift towards more sustainability while keeping their economic stability. This can be done by promoting investment, innovation, and digitization. I thereby agree with the US that innovation and technology play an important part since they allow for an increase in production with fewer resources and less negative environmental consequences. Lastly, we need to make consumers aware about the quality and price of their food. With their purchasing behavior, consumers decide which agricultural model they want to promote. Labeling products with their origin is one example of helping consumers to buy more local food. However, such labels must not restrict the possibilities of manufacturers and processors in terms of their entrepreneurial freedom and the internal market in the European Union, and should not interfere with global trade. All EU rules must be conform with WTO rules, an issue where the US often has troubles with the EU, rightfully so in some cases. In the end, our aim should not be an environment versus economy, but to combine the two. So I thank you very much, and I am looking forward to the discussions and the view from European and American farmers as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wins, for your presentation. And if I may now pass the floor to you, Mr. McKinney. Micro, please.
Gosh,
yes.
And it was such sage advice I was saying too. Farm Europe, thank you so much for organizing this. I believe, as I look back at what brought us to these differences, that we have not sustained the dialogue across the Atlantic Ocean with our good friends in Europe. I'm often told, and I believe this, I'm quite a World War II history buff, that we do have so much more that binds us than separates us. And yet I no longer let people give me that lecture, because there is so much difference in food and ag. And I think it's largely criticism one way, Europe criticizing the US, that we've taken a stand. But I'm thrilled to see where this dialogue is going. And that's what I want to speak about. There are some mega trends in here. Many of you might remember in the 1970s and 80s, a book came out called megatrends. And so I have been enamored with megatrends. And here's a couple. One was stated very well by Norbert. We're between 7 and 10 billion now. I think the planet has about 7.5 billion now, and we're moving toward 9 or 10 by 2050. We have to double the amount of food to be able to feed that population by that time. We are falling behind. Every year at the very famous World Food Prize held in Des Moines, Iowa, they reveal the gap report that talks about, are we meeting up? Are we keeping up with the need for productivity? And the short answer is we're not. Now, there's several reasons. A lot of it is food waste, and I'm thrilled that people are addressing food waste. But food waste by itself will not solve this problem. Food waste is not going to double our food production. We have to look at innovation, which is what has delivered the world its food supply for the last many decades, even into the millennia. That is what we've got to stay focused on. And it's the rejection of these technologies. The ones I'm familiar with all have proven not only safe, but very safe. That's what I'm focused on, and that's what I'd like to speak about. Now, as we look at innovation, there's no doubt we always have to keep sustainability in mind. And I've always been taught, and I think most of the world accepts, that sustainability is a three-legged stool. There's the environmental sustainability, clearly coming into greater focus now with all the things going on in our world with weather and climate and the like. There's the social responsibility. Are we doing what consumers need and want? Are we meeting the societal needs? And third is the economic, which we believe very firmly Europe forgot in Farm to Fork. There is no doubt about it, and there'll be a study coming out that shows that very easily. It is that intersect, that balance of the three, that brings us the goods that we need in a manner that is truly sustainable. And so that's what I want to visit on. Now, I'm not going to get into my friend Dr. Scott Hutchins' talk, because he brought along the blueprint, the science blueprint for USDA, and by extension, I think all of US agriculture is and should look at it. And then we're both working on the innovation agenda, which is merely a discussion that says innovation is our answer. Let me give you a very clear example. I'll take you to my own family farm in Indiana. Corn and soybeans is what we've produced. For 45 years, we had a swine finishing operation. We plant for the market. We've had white corn, popcorn, we've had GMO corn, we have non-GMO corn, we have seed corn. Let me talk about the GMO and the non-GMO. We have used technology such that we now take a corn planter or a soybean planter, it's the same planter, right into corn stalks. We leave those corn stalks the previous fall, and we take a very nice planter into that farm and we plant soybeans right into corn stalks. We're having record yields year after year. We're up every year in our productivity. We're also not disturbing the soil like we did when I was a kid. Back then, you moldboard plowed it, you'd flip that soil over in the fall usually, sometimes the spring, and then you had to disc or cultivate it twice, sometimes 3 times to get your seed bed. We do none of that. And today, our greenhouse gases that are emitted from the transition and the tillage of farmland soil is 1/2 of the farmland in Europe. The data is out there, and it's because we have adopted no-till and minimum till. Let me talk about minimum till. We have found that on our soybean stubble, which we leave the year before, we plant and we have to till it once. We're about 3 inches deep, and we have the seed bed we need. 1 pass, not 3 or 4 passes. That too is saving greenhouse gases, yet still preparing a seed bed. So we're finding that we're doing the right thing environmentally by adopting technologies. And the only thing that has allowed us to use no-till or minimum till is modern chemistries. Glyphosate and many other products like that have allowed us to do that. We believe we are very sustainable, and we've got the proof of that. Let me talk about the inputs that go into that. It's quite ironic that it's the I'm going to talk about GMO and non-GMO. The GMO corn or soybeans that we plant requires no insecticides, none. In short, we have met one of the goals of Farm to Fork in the reduction of pesticides, no insecticides, even when we went through 2 difficult years fighting fall armyworm, 0 insecticides. But it's the non-GMO corn, some which may find its way to Europe, that we have to use insecticides on. Tell me how to juxtapose that. How does that fit with Europe's goals? I'd like to go back 25, 30 years and say GMOs were a good thing and that you might want to consider those. Certainly the world wants to. So that's our own experience, and farmers across the USA, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, the Ukraine have found similar experiences. Don't ban pesticides that are going to deny me the chance to use no-till or minimum till. That'd be disastrous for the environment. So pick whichever you want, but that's the truth for a lot of farms here in the US of A. It's a food systems approach. I also want to talk about the approach. It's unfortunate that the European Union chooses to diss us on our food, denigrate us, criticize us. Europe is the only place in the world that does that to us. We talk about chlorinated chicken and hormone beef and big industrial agriculture. Well, let me point out a couple, 3 things. Every one of our farms, no matter what size they are, is a family farm. 95% of our family farms are just like my mom and dad's. My twin brother manages the farms, yes, with some hired labor, but the same goes for Europe. We don't criticize you, even though you got African swine fever ravaging parts of Germany and Poland and other parts. Back when mad cow disease came to the UK, what an unfortunate instance. We did not criticize Europe. So why is the criticism coming our way? I think we should stop that. If you want partnerships, and if we want to keep this great alliance, this cross-Atlantic alliance, let's put that aside. We have tried to behave properly. It might be good for our friends in Europe to do the same. We learned some hard lessons. It was the 1930s. My grandfather was just coming out of college at the time, and the Dust Bowl hit much of the western and southwestern part of the US. It was horrific. Because we didn't have conservation practices, dust enveloped cars, houses, buildings, livestock. Many lost their livelihood, and that's what brought along our Natural Resources Conservation Service. If you go through any part of the USA today, you'd love what you see. Grassy swales where you have erosion opportunity, a lot of grassy pathways alongside creeks, rivers, and streams to make sure that soil and nutrients don't find their way in. We're much, much cleaner than we ever have been. We're on a 1 trillion tree program now. Any trees that we harvest are replaced by 2. I have to tell you, I was in the UK at the big Drax energy facility. They went from they said this, I'll take their word for it. They went last in Europe to second, I believe, by converting 2 coal-fired energy plants from coal to wood pellets, mostly supplied by my friends in the US. And these are waste parts of trees that might be going in lumber. And whatever we cut, two trees replace the one. So we are all sustainable people. Your system of sustainability may be different than mine, but that doesn't mean that I'm less or that you're less. We are both sustainable, and we want to get more dialogue like this. We want to bring many of you over. I've told farmers, we told the Secretary of Ag in the UK, and I've said this to the Brussels folks, come on over and point in any direction and we'll go visit barns and we'll see how you feel about our animal welfare. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. And maybe that will make this hostility go away. So our ag innovation agenda, which I'll just touch on because I think Dr. Hutchins will embellish it, is all about using innovation to solve these problems. It was innovation that lets us reduce and eliminate insecticides. It is innovation that has brought our fertilizer usage down by 1/3. And we know this because we measure it. We know. We also know that there's no fertilizer left in the soil by the year end. We have dialed it in that accurately. We still put cover crops because it retains the soil. sucks up any excess nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium that might still be there. And let's talk about some of the real wins, including one for France. What about a French scientist and her colleague that won the Nobel Peace Prize here a couple, 3 weeks ago for the development of gene editing, the CRISPR-Cas technology? Way to go, those of you in France. Maybe agriculture and the policies that come from France and the rest of Europe could emulate the incredible discovery that those two scientists showed. I also think it's really cool that the World Food Program won the Nobel Peace Prize. Folks, they've done that because they have been eliminating and reducing hunger in the world. And I think that's going to come to an end if we are not allowed to use technologies like we in the US and so many other countries are going. So there's many laudable things about Farm to Fork. Your soil health, your desire for a set aside perhaps. We've done that very successfully. It's expensive, open your wallet book, but it's very appropriate in many cases. There are things about Farm to Fork I can embrace. There are other things that just make me wince. And I think we should rethink that. And my sense is that these dialogue is going to help inform and educate. And for anybody that wants to come to the US, once you're allowed to, we'll set you up on farms. You pick the place, we'll find the farms together. And I think you're going to see that we're a lot more alike than we are difference. And you might even learn a thing or two. So thank you for this dialogue. I'll stand by now for Q&A.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. Now for Q&A, we have been assessing what we get in the chat part and the Q&A part. There is one common thread that I might put to you both, which is, where do you see common ground on both sides? For instance, on feeding the world, because you both mentioned that, Mr. Lins and Mr. McKinney, that we'll have many more people to feed. How can we work together to do that? That is a question. And in that respect, also, I would ask you, Mr. McKinney, if you would like to elaborate on the study that you mentioned that would indicate or lead to conclusions in that respect. But perhaps first, you, Mr. Lins, if you would like to answer to this question.
Thank you very much for this question. I think that one of the opportunities is this discussion today, and I see a lot of need that we have to work together between the European Union and the United States. But on the other hand, I have to tell you, I cannot ignore discussions in our society in the European Union. I know there are differences between the north, the south, and the eastern part of the European Union, and I can tell you that last week we had the positioning of the European Parliament on the common agriculture policy for the next years in the European Union. And I myself and my more or less agricultural related colleagues were very much attacked by non-governmental organizations for the compromise we made between environmental, economic, and social aspects of this common agriculture policy. And there was a lot of criticism within the European media on this compromise on the common agriculture policy. But I agree that we as Europeans, we cannot ignore what is happening around us, and that's often the case in the European discussion. For example, you mentioned that, Mr. McKinney, you mentioned that with the new breeding techniques, I'm one of the supporters in the European Parliament that we have to bring forward a scientific discussion on the new breeding techniques. And you are right. Yeah? We as Europeans, we are the founders of these techniques, and we got the Nobel Prize on that. Yeah? And sometimes I have the feeling that we are ignoring innovations and new techniques as part of the solutions. And there I fully agree with this part of your speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wins. If I may turn to you now, Mr. McKinney, your take on this question.
Yes, well, I think there are still many areas of agreement. Let me take farm to fork specifically. I think the objectives we're going to find a lot of agreement on. The tactics is where some we agree with, but 2 or 3 others we categorically disagree with. So it's the tactics where there is the disagreement. The objectives we find to be appropriate and lofty and are things we've been pursuing for many, many years. So that's an area of commonality, is the objectives. I think there's another objective, is that we all love farmers, and I think we hold farmers in very high regard. I still go back, it's a very simple theme, but think about what Dr. Norman Borlaug said. Take it to the farmer, take it to the farmer. I do not understand why repeatedly policy in Europe denies the farmer from trying things out. Goodness me, Europe is well known for incredible scientific discovery. I've been a fan historically of Madame Curie. When I was in Paris, I went and visited the tomb. I think she's probably rolling over in her grave at the rejection of technologies that can benefit. It's I think the difference here is the desire for absolutely, unequivocally no risk. Well, society is going to fail if there's no risk taken. I mean, there's a risk when you go out in your automobile or on your bicycle or you take a walk. And I think we cannot deny the opportunities for innovation. So I think farmers and the love and the respect for farmers, let's let Europe, let farmers try it. They are the consummate environmentalists. At least that's what I've found. I grew up, as did many of my colleagues, growing up with mom and dad, grandparents saying, leave the farm better than you found it. We heard that repeatedly. And I want you to know, I think the spirit of feeding a hungry world, sometimes that's a cliche, it's overstated, but to this day, I still talk to farmers, and yes, they've got to make a living, but that's still what drives a lot of them. The pride of knowing that the excess that they produce that goes beyond what they and their family need is going somewhere in the world to provide for a needy family. It gets them up in the morning and gets them bed at night. It's really something that drives. Finally, I think we have to be honest. If we continue to reject technologies, or if regions of the world like Europe continue to reject, and I'm not so concerned about Europe. If Europe just wanted to do that for Europe, that's your choice. But Europe is choosing to export this philosophy and dictate to other countries around the world that you too will follow this methodology. Oh my gosh. What do we say to our kids and our grandkids when famine and starvation sets in? And it will. It will. And by the way, I'm not saying that because I'm an advocate of big farms or innovation. I support them. But when I was the director of ag in the state of Indiana, I spent more of my time helping new farmers get started, and many of them chose organic. I was their biggest fan. I found programs that lifted them up. I'm indifferent on the type of productivity, but let me be clear, we cannot just produce food for the elites who can afford the finer foods, the finer ways. We have got to continue to produce food that is not cheap, that's the wrong word, but it's inexpensive and allows for even the most needy of us to be able to afford food. I think there's a lot more in common, but for sure, and I'm telling you just like it is, there's a lot of differences, and we're going to be addressing those. Thank you for the question.
Well, thank you both for your presentations and for answering the questions. I can say that we have a lot to discuss, a lot to do to better our understanding, but this is a good start in my view. And we were very honored to have you both, Mr. Wins and Mr. McKinney. And thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Have a nice day.
If I may move now to the second panel, we have here with us Mr. Pierre Bascou. Pierre Bascou, for those who don't know him, which is not my case because I've worked with him for many years, is the Director of Sustainability and Income Support Department in the Director General for Agriculture of the European Commission. And then we'll have Dr. Scott Hutchins. He's a Deputy Undersecretary for the US Department of Agriculture's Research, Education, and Economics. So, as agreed, you have the floor first, Pierre, please, to explain farm to fork and biodiversity.
Thank you very much, Joao. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I will start. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Farm Europe and the USDA for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity to talk and discuss about sustainability in agriculture. And I have to say the first panel, was quite stimulating and brought a lot of issues that I think that we need to, in my view, further deepen and clarify in order to continue, I think, our debate, I think, in particular on the commonalities. I have to say, I think the timing is, in my view, perfect since, and it has been already alluded by Mr. Linz, we are entering into the last stages of discussion between European institutions about, I think, the European agricultural policy for the next decade. Agricultural policy was, at its core, I think, the need to ensure full sustainability of the primary sector. I will not spend too much time on the underlying reasons for this strong focus on sustainability. I think you know basically most of them, and some of them have already been mentioned. The impact of climate change, the loss of biodiversity, the degradation of natural resources in the EU, but not only the EU, at a global level, the difficult socio-economic conditions faced by primary producers, but also, and this is something which is particularly important in Europe, also the new societal and consumer demand. So all these factors have triggered an urgent need to rethink our production model. And this rethink is also essential in order to meet the international commitments of the EU. Among them, of course, I think the Paris Agreement on climate, but also the UN Agreement on the Sustainable Development Goals. So rather than to talk about the why, I would like to focus my intervention on the how the Commission is intending to achieve sustainability for its farm sector. And there I would like to highlight 5 key elements in order to structure my intervention. The first element to underline is that this drive towards sustainability at EU level is fully embedded within an overall strategy that concerns the whole EU economy. This strategy, for those who live in Europe, which is called, I think, the European Green Deal, and which has been announced at the end of last year, aims at promoting a new green growth that will ensure that the EU economy becomes climate neutral by 2050, become fully sustainable, competitive, and resource efficient. This Green Deal covers many strategies, many initiatives, many action plans, from environment to climate to circular economy, and it covers also all the sectors of the economy, from energy, from transport, from industry, and of course to the food system. And the sustainability objective for agriculture is foreseen within this overall food system. So not only looking at the primary sector, but also looking at all stages at the food production system. And this is, in my view, the first time that the EU is proposing a comprehensive agenda looking at all these different stages. And this agenda, you mentioned it, is called the Farm to Fork strategy, aims at the end, if you want to simplify it, aims at transforming the way we produce, which is one thing which is very important, but also the way we consume. And this part also will help addressing some of the criticism that we have heard, I think, over the last few weeks, and in particular in the first panel. The second element I would like to make relates to the farm-to-fork strategy. And there, I think it is important to be clear, the farm-to-fork strategy is not a legal proposal. It is a long-term vision that sets in motion a gradual process, leaving a lot of room for discussion, for consultation with stakeholders, and a gradual process in order to produce more with less and to produce better. And a gradual process that builds on the many efforts that have already been achieved, but that we need to strengthen, because we shouldn't forget that in Europe, over the last 20 to 25 years, we have reduced significantly the level of greenhouse gas emission. We have reduced significantly the level of fertilizer use, of pesticide use, etc., etc. And we have improved water quality. So a lot has been done, but we need to strengthen that. So what is proposed in the farm-to-fork strategy is not a revolution, even if we like a lot in many parts of the EU talking about revolution, but it's mainly an acceleration of the shift towards sustainability. And this in view of 4 elements. The first one is to further reduce the environmental and climate footprint of the food system. Second element is that to lead a global transition towards sustainability, because the difficulty we find in Europe, in the US, in Brazil, in many parts of the world are common. The answers may be different, but I think this part is the challenges are common. We want also to make primary producers fully benefit from the new opportunities linked to this new demand for sustainable food, but opportunities also from the emerging carbon farming market, from the potential development of the bioeconomy. So from a wide range of new economic opportunities that will emerge in this transition towards sustainability. And last, and fourth and last, we want also to ensure that our food system is robust and resilient. And in my view, this is extremely timely if we look at the impact of the pandemic, the impact that the pandemic had in the first half of this year. It is extremely important to consolidate the resilience and the robustness of our food system. So the ultimate objective is to ensure that everybody has access to safe, sustainable, sufficient, and affordable food, and at the same time, and it has been said many times in this first panel, at the same time ensuring fairer economic return for all the different actors across the food chain, and in particular for the primary producers. The third element I would like to mention refers to the quantified target, because they have drawn a lot of attention. This long-term vision has been translated into quantified targets to achieve by 2030, and this besides a lot of other initiatives related to animal welfare, food consumption, dietary pattern, food waste, etc., etc. These targets relate to the reduction in the use and in the risk of chemical pesticide, in the reduction of excessive use of fertilization, and here I would like to underline the excessive use of fertilization. There's no point, I think, in reducing fertilizers per se, in the reduction of the use of antibiotics, but also in the increase in the area under organic farming, in the increase in the areas dedicated to on-farm biodiversity, and this is something which has already been tested in the US a few years ago, and also in order to improve the coverage of rural areas and for farm producers in terms of next generation broadband. And there it is important to underline that these targets are meant to be, I don't know if it is an English word, but I'm sorry, in French, I'm not an English expert, are meant to be aspirational, political, and they are meant to be set at EU level. So these targets are meant more to illustrate and to demonstrate the magnitude of the efforts which are needed in order to reach the overarching objective of sustainability, rather than being targets that need to prescribe what farmers have to do and increasing the red tape for farmers. They are meant to drive and steer the Commission work, and they are meant to encourage and stimulate member states in designing and implementing the future agricultural policy in the context of the strategic plan. And if you allow me to use an example in the field of pesticide, this would mean first to reduce delays in the approval process of pesticide, This will mean revising the legislation on sustainable use of pesticides. This will mean also investing more in the development of alternative crop protection products and investing more in developing alternative farming practices, such as precision farming, agroecology, agroforestry, organic farming, etc. And this target will also drive member states to ensure that the strategic plan, meaning I think the plan in which that will embed, that will integrate all the policy decisions, that this strategic plan contain measures to encourage and support financially farmers to reduce pesticide use. My fourth element that I would like to highlight relates to one of the points which have been raised at many times, I think the first panel, relate to the role of research, innovation, investment, and new technology, which are at the heart of this strategy. And one of the speakers before me, I think, has mentioned, Europe is a great place for science. And we do believe that digital technologies have the potential to increase both the sustainability of the sector and also its competitiveness. We believe that they can transform agriculture by helping farmers to work more precisely, to work more efficiently, and to work more sustainably through sensors, through more tailored application for fertilizers, irrigation, etc. And this will help farmers to reduce the level of use of input and also the level of greenhouse gas emission. We can also mention agro-robotics that can help support the production process. The Commission is also currently looking into new innovative techniques, and there I would like to underline, including biotechnology and the development of bio-based products, and the role that they may play in increasing sustainability. For instance, in the role that they may play in reducing the use and the risk of pesticide, of course, and I would like to add, provided that they are safe for consumers and provided that they are safe for the environment. An area where Europe wants to continue investing relates to the satellite imagery and its role in supporting farm management, in particular precision farming, for improving jointly the economic performance of the farm sector and the environmental performance of the sector. Satellite data provide also information that can create opportunity for advisory services, and they can also give nearly real-time overview of production at regional or national level. Of course, information that can be best used, I think, by farmers, but also by policymakers. We also need, in this context, to improve our technological capability to obtain the information necessary for improving sustainability. Now, with this concerns primarily the development of clever algorithms. They are mainly based on artificial intelligence, algorithms that are capable of extracting the agro-environmental information from satellite, from drone, or for any kind of smartphone imagery. But in the future, we should also benefit from enlarging the scope of data sources, from versatile satellite sensors, from the harnessing of Internet of Things originating from farm machinery and sensors. So there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of research. There's a lot that needs to be done in terms of investment, but we do believe that investing in these digital technologies and in the promotion of the use of these technologies will significantly contribute to succeed on the sustainability ambition in the EU. My fifth and last point that I would like to talk about, I think, is I would like to say a word regarding the tools that the Commission has proposed for the future policy framework in order to support this transition towards full sustainability. And here I would like to highlight three elements. The first one is that we have proposed a new, what I would call a new policy delivery mechanism that can provide much more flexibility for the member states in order to, I would say, meet better the specific needs at local or regional level. Second element I would like to underline is that we are proposing a more integrated approach between the agricultural policy on one side and the legislation and the policies related to environment and climate on the other side. And the third and last element I would like to refer to is the reinforced policy toolbox with a mix. We are proposing a mix of mandatory elements which are related to the need for farmers to receive the full payment, to respect some specific legislation related to environment, related to climate, but also some specific production standards related to soil, biodiversity, and water, and also a mix of mandatory elements and voluntary financial incentives. We could talk about the eco scheme, which is the novelty in our policy toolbox, but also the more traditional and very effective measures in the second pillar: agri-environmental support, investment support, support for knowledge transfer, etc. So a reinforced toolbox in the future to help farmers into this transition towards greater sustainability. So these are the main points I wanted to mention in this in this journey towards this transition towards full sustainability in Europe. It's an ambitious process. It's an ambitious long-term process, if I may say so, which is important for the EU, but which is important also at global level, because the challenges we face are very common to all the member states. But I'm convinced that in this debate today, but also in the future debate we will have with our American friends, we will realize that the EU and the US share many challenges and many objectives in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. And now, if I may ask Dr. Hutchins, so we can have the outline of the US policy developments in this area. Please, Dr. Hutchins.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for that introduction and also the opportunity to participate in this important forum. You know, in my various professional roles, I've spent a great deal of time the last 30 years visiting the EU and learning about the agricultural systems and visiting with the farmers and supply chain partners supporting them. You know, we all know the reality we face, and it's been stated here many times in terms of population growth. But we believe that in order to feed this growing population, we must sustainably intensify agricultural production with the technological advances of modern agriculture and environmental stewardship. In other words, sustainable agriculture of the future will be a high-tech agriculture. Dr. Pacheco mentioned a few of these types of technologies, but there are many other, and it should not be an exclusive set, it should be an inclusive set. Undersecretary McKinney referenced the Global Agricultural Productivity Report, and what we know from that report is that we're not keeping pace. And even the developed organizations in countries like the US and the EU are not keeping pace. So you can imagine that the food insecure nations are not able to keep pace. We need to accelerate. And really the only path to this, close this gap, is with innovation, science-based transformative innovation. The good news is that the United States does have a track record of significantly growing agricultural output over the past 90 years. And we've increased food and fiber production by over 400%. But here's the important part of that: by using 10% less land over that same period. And we're not anywhere near the crest. The opportunity for continued growth and productivity is ahead of us. With safe, abundant, and affordable food, the lifespan of Americans has gone from age 49 to almost 80 in that very same 90-year period. We're achieving this success with fewer resources by harnessing innovation and technology. We're choosing to improve versus remove the critical tools that farmers have, which is a theme. We commend the EU's strong commitment to sustainability. We really do. And we don't differ greatly in the overarching desired outcomes, as Undersecretary McKinney has said and others have said here already today. But we do differ widely on how to achieve those outcomes. Secretary Perdue stated many times, and he's sincere about it, that we really want to work with the EU towards sustainably feeding the world while allowing EU farmers to compete equitably with those in the US and around the world. But let's first discuss sustainable agriculture, because it's a word that's used often. There are three required elements, as noted previously, to sustainable agriculture. The economic, the social, and the environmental pillars are all critical. First and foremost is the economic viability. Farmers and ranchers must have the opportunity to develop an economically viable enterprise to support their family and to support their business. Social responsibility works towards sustainably producing abundant and affordable food supply. If people can't afford the food or have access to it, it's not sustainable and it's not socially responsible. And finally, environmental, which tends to be the keystone in the center of most often with discussions on sustainable agriculture, but we do need to recognize we must conserve and protect our natural resources. All three of these components are critical, or it's not truly sustainable. And this is really the lens we need to look at when we review all ag policy, whether it's the EU, the US, or other parts of the world. Stated succinctly, farmland exists to produce farm products, but the land must produce more each successive year. There must be a balance between production and production capability. And this is what I refer to as the PPC balance, or the production and production capability balance. In agriculture, increased production improves our ability to reduce food insecurity and for farmers to be profitable, whether that's through increased yields, improved quality, or reduced food loss and food waste. Production capability includes our approaches to ensure the land encompassed as the soil, the air, and the water will continue to expand agricultural productivity over perpetuity using technology, tools, improved farming practices, and other items and approaches that the farmers truly need. Our experience is that farmers strive to be the very best stewards of their land, and they need the tools to do that responsibly. Sustained intensification is the way forward, not only for the PPC balance I referenced for farmland, but it offers us the opportunity to conserve and enhance all other types of land through the intensification of farmland sustainably. The U.S. has a long track record of science-based innovation, which gives farmers and ranchers access to a range of tools to support the next era of sustainable modern farming. And thanks to the U.S. public and private sector investment in agricultural research and their commitment to forge innovative tools from their discoveries, U.S. farmers and ranchers are leading the way in reducing environmental impact while growing more food with less land and less water. These are the facts. These aren't hopes or dreams or aspirations. These are the facts. So we have confidence and evidence that we can continue to make progress in this direction. Moreover, our farmers and ranchers have a proven track record of embracing change. And in many ways, our farmers themselves are citizen scientists that are constantly innovating on their own farms. Remember that no 2 acres are the same, and the only individual who knows that difference and that specificity is the farmer who farms those acres or hectares. But we can't rest on our track record. So seeing emerging challenges and opportunities, the USDA launched the Agriculture Innovation Agenda for the United States, which aims to build on our past record, but to increase production by 40% while cutting the environmental footprint in the U.S. agriculture by half by 2050. Now, these are big, bold goals, but we believe they're achievable if they're formulated responsibly and we bring the entire focus of the public and private sector to this challenge. The policy has 3 interdependent components: research and innovation, program adoption to ensure that the tools are utilized, and output and metrics to measure our progress and expected outcomes. So when we say something like reduce environmental footprint by 50%, we define what that looks like, we measure our progress to that end, and we seek to achieve it. The United States whole of society approach to stimulate open innovation enables American farmers and ranchers to continually produce more with fewer resources. The progress this past century is proof that sustainable intensification of agriculture is truly possible. There were some examples cited earlier. Host plant resistance is one I'll restate. Host plant resistance to insects via proven safe genome design, for example, often yields better than their conventional counterparts, particularly in drought scenarios. So we also see demonstrated climate resiliency as a result of this adoption of technology. Environmentally, there's been an intentional consequence of this technology to reduce the use of pesticides while achieving a far more consistent and resilient cadence of production. Remember, the same individuals and groups that developed the genetically modified insect resistance were the ones that previously had developed pesticides for that same market. So they're willing to advance and innovate toward new solutions. Moreover, these technologies scale up and down, meaning small landholders in food insecure countries can utilize these technologies within their own breeding programs with minimal investment or supply chain infrastructure. So we can truly have an impact on the world with the utilization of these technologies. Modern agricultural production tools, including pesticides, fertilizers, veterinary products, and genetic enhancement, afford farmers and ranchers the advantage of managing their production for higher yields while strengthening their production capability, that PPC balance I referenced. So when combined with new and emerging digital technologies, and we agree certainly that these are the forefront of major advances, their attributes of the traditional or their past technologies are further enhanced, improved, and focused to minimize any additional impact. We need to ensure that policies don't inhibit research in doing what it does best by always improving and pioneering cutting-edge solutions. Technologies have life cycles themselves. Investing to replace or improve older tools versus simply removing them is the essence of sustainable agriculture. Farmers and society both benefit in an improve versus a remove policy paradigm. Removing critical products farmers need is not an aspirational goal, that's a definitive goal. Next generation technologies in agriculture will allow for prescriptive intervention and database design of farming decisions. Tools informing and improving variety selection, plant spacing, fertilization, pest control, and more are almost beyond our imagination today as these technologies continue to evolve at a rapid pace. So at this critical juncture for humankind, let's not stifle the creativity of researchers or disincentivize the evaluation, creation, or modification of revolutionary technologies. Let's fully embrace it and incentivize it. The USDA Agriculture Innovation Agenda is our plan to embrace enhanced technology and tools to meet the agricultural sustainability challenges and truly strengthen the PPC balance. And we also just launched the USDA Science Blueprint, which has 5 key themes that represent the capabilities we need to build and embrace in the next era of agriculture. These include sustainable intensification, which includes concepts such as regenerative agriculture as an example, and will help us mitigate climate impacts. A second full theme is climate adaptation to ensure we bring breeding technologies and others to allow us to adapt. Food and nutrition translation, taking precision to the nutritional concepts, and in value-added innovations, which allow us to continually improve the use of our farm products, reduce loss and waste, but also to advocate for science policy and science policy leadership. The EU Farm to Fork approach, it seems, takes a very different path than what we've proposed with the Ag Innovation Agenda. And without regard to finding substitutes, the EU policy potentially reduces access to the very tools that farmers and ranchers depend upon. The loss of crop protection tools, for example, will impact productivity due to increased crop losses, which cause problems along the food supply chain, such as quality, safety, food security as a whole ultimately will suffer. These impacts are more than intuitive, they can be modeled. Farmers and ranchers need access to a range of tools. Without them, the very livelihood of the farmer or rancher will be at risk, which essentially abandons the farmer, the only group that can steward the land and manage the PPC balance on behalf of society. Look, science is not regional and most innovations have global utility. Without access to critical uses and applications, innovation may stall or be discouraged within the private sector. Coupled with the concerns of the US government has expressed more broadly with Horizon Europe, we can only conclude that agricultural research collaborations between the EU and third countries will be severely hindered to allow us collectively to address these challenges. Science supports the development of the tools and production systems, and science determines their risk. Science policy that embraces risk proportionate and rational regulatory frameworks enables sustainable agriculture. The frequently cited precautionary principle, however, is not a science principle at all. It's a political principle and has no place in science-based regulatory frameworks. You know, we can't pick and choose our facts or when we believe in science. Damage to health and nutrition has already been recognized because many groups essentially encourage people to fear their food. That is not going to support food insecurity challenges that we face. Technology will be the only way we can address the impacts to agriculture from a changing climate and a growing population. And the sooner we embrace that reality collectively as a global community, the sooner we can conserve more habitat and enhance conservation and biodiversity. I mentioned that the impacts could be modeled, and the USDA Economic Research Service, part of my group, has done just that in the stated targets identified in the Farm to Fork strategy. ERS has used a widely acclaimed and often used global trait analysis project model, GTAP, developed and maintained by Purdue University to do this modeling. It's a widely recognized global model. The consortium that contributes to the data and uses the model, of course, includes the EU. So it's data that's generated from the EU. The results indicate the potential for negative impacts to farm income and farm productivity while consumers pay more and global ag GDP drops. For example, EU farmers will see or could see their production decrease by 7 to 12% under these policies, and farm income decrease by over 15% on already tight margins in the farming community. But one of the most concerning impacts is the estimated increase in global food insecurity. The report clearly indicates that if only the EU implements their policy, then 22 million additional people around the world will become food insecure. Far more will become food insecure with a broader adoption. A peer-reviewed report summarizing the analysis will be released soon and will be available on the ERS website. I encourage you to read the report once it's available. It's staggering and reminds us that agriculture policy, while seemingly local, also has global impacts. As noted, sustainable agriculture has three key components: financial, social, and environmental sustainability. The economic research clearly shows that proposed farm-to-fork policies fails on the economic and social criteria, and the environmental one is not based on any sound science. So we must conclude it's not remotely sustainable. Nonetheless, we do truly want to work with our European colleagues to identify ways to meet the original farm-to-fork ambition for sustainability, while allowing farmers to have access to their tools, while stimulating innovation to create new transformative solutions and tools, and improving the tools that they have today. Science and innovation can enable the three components of sustainable innovation and bring balance to production and production capability around the world. We truly believe all countries should choose the route of science and embrace true sustainable agriculture, where farmers are treated respectfully and responsibly for being the stewards of the land and have the right to build productive and profitable businesses. These are important topics. We appreciate the opportunity to have a dialogue on them, and we thank you again for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Hutchins. May I remind viewers that you can ask questions through the Q&A chat part in the Zoom facility you are on. And now I'll move to the third panel. We have heard views and outline policies in both sides of the Atlantic. Now let's move to those who are directly concerned with the application of these policies, and also those who can have new opportunities or face those challenges. I welcome Ellie Tsifourou. She's the Director General of Gaia Epikairein. Gaia Epikairein is a Greek entity with a double mission to promote the interest of 150,000 farmers, 71 ag cooperatives, and offer them a high-end sustainability service by investing in knowledge and innovation. And after also Mr. Derek Haigwood, you are a farmer, sir, who grows soybeans, rice, corn, cotton, grain sorghum, and wheat. I hope I haven't forgotten any speculation from your side. Very impressive. In Arkansas, and you are also a board director of the US Soybean Export Council. But first, Ellie, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Joao. Good afternoon to the colleagues from Brussels, and good morning to the colleagues from the other side of the Atlantic. I'm very happy and honored to participate in such an interesting event, and I would like to warmly thank and congratulate Farm Europe and the USDA for taking the initiative to organize it. Indeed, as we read in the invitation, considering the policy developments at both sides, there couldn't be a more perfect timing to establish this Transatlantic Sustainability Dialogue. Well, I'm not a farmer myself, but I have been working with farmers and representing them for many years. And one first remark I would like to make is that I firmly believe that farmers all over the world, and I'm saying this with strong convictions, don't have that many differences. And without wanting to sound naive, and of course taking into consideration all of our differences, I would like to underline that, especially from the farmer's perspective, we need this dialogue. We need a common ground of understanding with our colleagues from the US, not only because the challenges and the broad policy objectives are common, but also because in the path towards sustainability, the entire farming profession, whichever part of the world it is practiced, needs to be defended and somehow reintroduced to society. I thereby believe that there is also common ground even for action. And I really look forward to the unfolding of the next steps of this dialogue that we are launching today. I would like to begin my brief presentation on how we address the sustainability challenge as Greek farmers, but also as members of the bigger EU farming family, by sharing with you a reflection on the sustainability term itself. I think that we all agree that we repeatedly witness in history the emergence and re-emergence of terms that kind of flood the public sphere and become dominating concepts. The risk always with this conceptual inundation is that in the end, terms may become empty of meaning and sort of ready-mades that we apply without really signifying or pointing to something concrete. In the case of sustainability that we are discussing today, I believe that it is up to farmers to bring meaning to the concept by engaging in concrete practices, and on the other side, that it is the policymakers' responsibility to design support and tools that allow for these concrete practices to flourish. So following this reasoning, I will first briefly present you what we are doing in Greece in order to bring sustainability into practice. And then based on our experience and the lessons learned, I will extrapolate a bit by bringing into the discussion some key messages at policy level. So our core mission as YEA is to assist Greek farmers and agri-cooperatives in making a quality leap towards a more sustainable and competitive agriculture. And to achieve this, we have heavily invested in knowledge and innovation, and namely on a smart farming system called YEASense, supporting the decision-making process for thousands of Greek farmers and agri-cooperatives, based, of course, on the know-how brought in the coalition by our IT strategic partner. YEASense is currently one of the most ambitious smart farming projects currently applied in the EU when it comes to both its targeting and implementation. And present, because it is a work in progress, it keeps evolving. It is applied in 65 areas in Greece, in 33 different crops, covering more than 100,000 hectares. And it is also being applied in different countries in the EU and non-EU countries like Spain, Portugal, Poland, Cyprus, and Ukraine. So how does it work? We collect data from 4 different categories of data sources. First of all, from the sky, through the open EU Copernicus satellite system. From the field with proximity sensing data that are acquired through a network of telemetric stations that are placed in the fields and that measure atmospheric, soil, and plant parameters. From in situ observations and sampling, this is where the practical empirical knowledge of the farmer and the advisor play in, and also the collaboration with research institutes for what concerns plant and soil analysis. And the 4th source of data, which is essential, is the data that comes from farmer himself, meaning from the digitalization of the farmer's actions in the field. The farmer has to continuously feed in the system on his practices on the field if we want to calibrate it in the next cultivation period. So all these complementary types of data and knowledge, technological, scientific, practical, organizational, etc., are used to provide smart advice to farmers on 3 main components: fertilization, irrigation, and plant protection. And of course, advisors hold a key role as innovation facilitators in this process, not only because they provide the smart advice, but because they also bridge the gaps and guarantee continuity and trust between the different actors involved. The business model that we have adopted is smart farming as a service, which means that it is investment free for the farmer. It is us, the coalition, YEA, that is in charge of the investment cost, and the farmers have only to pay for the advice provided, which is approximately estimated between 1.5 and 3% of the annual output value of the undertaking. In practice, it works like in the telecom sector, where operators put in place and maintain the infrastructure, and the end user pays only for the service. We have achieved significant results up so far. I will drop some numbers. In crop protection, we arrived to 63% reduction in olive growing, in fertilization to 65% in the case of table pitches, in irrigation 45% in cotton. The yield increase varies between 8 to 18%, and the overall economic benefit coming from the input reduction and the yield increase varies from 25 to 36%, the higher percentage we achieved in olive growing. This means, I believe that these figures showcase that sustainable intensification is possible thanks to digital technologies, and of course that economic and environmental objectives can be combined. A few key messages in terms of policy level out of our experience. First of all, economic and environmental objectives go hand in hand. And through our best practice, I think that this is evidence, and the CAP rightly encourages this kind of approaches. Then, in order to democratize the large-scale diffusion of digital technologies among all EU farmers, we need investment support, and we need to build trust through effective communication and education among farmers and advisors. Another point, data should become meaningful for farmers through the provision of technologically enhanced advisory services, and this is why the CAP rightly places an ever-growing emphasis in farm advisory services that will be enriched in the future policy by the enormous potential of digitalization. And then fourth point, we shouldn't ignore the potential of data sharing with all the different parameters, of course, that we have to take into account, because data sharing and interoperability at EU level could be a great asset for a swifter double economic and environmental performance for EU agriculture as a whole. So I'll put a full stop here, and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you so much, Ellie. And now we would love to hear from you, Mr. Haygood. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here and on this conference. And after listening and having the opportunity to speak here at the end, after listening to all the speakers, this has been great. And one thing I realized is after the grower from Greece, after listening to fellow farmers speak, you can tell that there's a lot of passion, and I too have a tremendous amount of passion. And when I think about sustainability and what that sustainability is to me, it's hard to put a number on it. We've talked about the three stools, and we've talked about social, environmental, and economics. I, as a farmer, have a goal, and that's to grow the best crop that I possibly can. In the meanwhile, I need to turn a profit. And ultimately, doing those two things, I want to pass this ground to my two sons. The ground that I'm farming now, I'm reaping benefits that took place in the 80s when I was just a child. My grandfather, before that, we are reaping benefits that have continued to turn economic profit and environmental profits because of the innovation that the American farmer has had and the investment that the USDA and the Natural Resource Conservation Service has put into the US farmer. And so I'm reaping the rewards of that right now. And we could quote numbers and talk all these numbers, but what I see is that I have a healthy soil, and it's been passed to me, and I can feed my family. And not only doing that, I can feed the world, and I can continually turn out this high quality crop that the US is known for. So I have to keep on track because I'm so passionate about that, because you talk about my livelihood and you talk about the future of the future generations coming behind me. So, as you mentioned, I do grow a variety of crops here in Arkansas. In the South, we have a longer growing season, and I have the ability to grow many different crops. Whatever the market calls for, I can switch and do that. You know, we talk about growing rice and cotton, and we have the technology to do that side by side. Those two crops are very hard to grow side by side because certain chemical drifts and things can be very dangerous. But one thing that does show is that our soil, we're not producing a crops or crops that are just a monoculture. I can go from soybeans to corn to rice to cotton. And during the off season, like right now, we're focusing a lot of time on planting cover crops. And that has been a true innovative new way that we are making our soil more healthy. In that cover crop, we plant a variety of things. We're planting cereal rye and black oats, mustard, all these things that are helping the soil and eliminate pests in the soil, such as nematodes, by incorporating mustard into our cover crop. And we've been doing this for about 6 years, and we're starting to develop a technique or almost an art of perfecting what blend helps the sandier soil or the loamier soil. And this is something that the U.S. farmer, not just myself, we always are pursuing, is being a trendsetter, taking advantage of the new technologies and the new opportunities that present us. When we talk about technologies, the first thing I think of is biotechnology. And without that, I wouldn't have the opportunity to use no-till on 100% of my acres. We farm about 15,000 acres. And I'm sorry, I don't know how many hectares that is, but for each 1,000 acres of farm ground that we no-till, we save 4,000 gallons of diesel fuel. So that's quick and easy math on how much fuel we're saving. And that's not any depreciation on my tractor or hiring someone to go across the field again. That's just in basic fuel costs, which, using technology, the fuel that we are burning is soy diesel. We have it brought to our farm, and we practice what we preach. We're using this renewable resource, and we are using things that I wish my grandfather could see right now. I remember working with him growing up, when we started talking about GPS and started talking about these new technologies. And to him, it was just a great idea. And now we see it. Now we see that the size of this piece of paper, I can go in and put a micronutrient or a macronutrient down to the size of this paper across my field. Imagine the data that it takes and the technology it takes to farm 15,000 acres, and I can pinpoint what I'm doing. It's something that I want to be on the cutting edge on. I want to try new technologies. When these traits come out in seeds, we have test plots. We have new test plots out right now that seed companies are trying to develop to use less fuel, to use less water, to use less chemicals, to use less fertilizer, because yes, that is great for the environment. But to go back, what I'm talking about, I don't want to spend money on fertilizer or chemical. That comes out of my pocketbook. So the less I use, not only is it better for my farm and the water on my farm and the ground, it's better for my pocketbook. And ultimately, that economic impact, that resounds very loudly to me, because I have to continue to do this, and I want to continue to practice my passion. There's so many things we could talk about. I've traveled all over the world. I've traveled with Secretary McKinney all over the world, talking about the passion that I have for sustainability, the passion that my family had in the past when we were doing this before it was cool, before it had this great new ring that we're all talking about. My family has trees on the river, riparian buffers set up that are 25 years old. And that was put in place by my grandfather to protect this land that I'm farming, protect the river, to protect the soil, and protect that asset that has continued to provide for my family for over 100 years. So listening to all the speakers today, and I know that we all want to come to an agreement, and it sounds like we have a lot in common that we can work with and continue to be sustainable. I hope that trade, which has become such a major thing for the U.S. farmer, we want to be involved with the EU. We want you to continue to purchase our soy, to continue to purchase our goods. And while we have this opportunity to work on sustainability, work with trade, we see that if sustainability is important to buyers in the EU, then there's only one choice. We all know that. We see the numbers coming in, 53% of the soy brought into the EU in whole beans is grown unsustainably. 20% of the 1920 crop has been grown by the US that you're bringing in. And we have the metrics and the history to show that we are sustainable. And we hope that that can continue to be, because I need that ground and I need that trade to be a good and sustaining farmer. Thank you for your time. I could talk about this all day, and I'm anxious to hear questions and things that come. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about something that means so much to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your intervention. We have a bunch of questions. There is one that might be asked to all of you, but I will give the floor first to you, Mr. Haygood, and you, Ellie, if you want to start, and then after Dr. Hutchins and Pierre, you are most welcome, which is something certainly true here in Europe, but I believe also probably in the United States, which is a growing lack of trust from the public on farmers and farming. What are your views on that? Ellie, do you want to have a start?
Yes, this is a very interesting and timely question. I think Mr. Lins mentioned it at the beginning. We experienced a very difficult vote on the Common Agricultural Policy regulations in the Parliament. I think that in the last years, decades maybe, there have been so many things that changed in the farming profession and in the environment around the farming profession. I mean, the markets function in a very different way than some decades ago. The challenges are bigger and they are much more complex. And in the meantime, the farmers somehow lost the connection with society. In terms of communicating what the farming profession is all about and how it keeps evolving in this ever-changing and more complicated context. This is not an easy task, but I believe, and this is something that my organization and at national level at least we try to do, is that we focus a lot of our energy and our forces in trying to open up to society, not only to the consumer as the final buyer of our products, to the broader society, in order to bridge the gaps and make them understand what it means to be a farmer today. I think that this should also be an objective, a policy objective. I've studied communication. I believe that investing in communication can have a very positive long-term impact, not only to the farmer himself, but also to the policy that we also need to defend. So effectively communicating in order to bridge the gap with society, not only with the consumer. And the last remark, let's not forget that in the agri-food chain, and this is one of the key messages that we address to the Greek audience in all our communication efforts, the farmer and the consumer are the weakest parts of the agri-food chain, and that linking them and trying to bridge the gaps between these weakest parts of the food chain can only be to the advantage of both. And I think that digital technologies give us an enormous potential to bridge this gap. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haywood, your take on this.
Ellie, I agree with you, and I think you have some really good points. Another thing that the mistrust comes from lack of information. And in the US, less than 2% of the population are actual farmers. So the supply chain and this huge agricultural chain that we speak of, it's massive, and it's a huge percentage of the population. But when it boils down to it, 2% of the US population are farmers. And of this is still a large number of farmers, and 98% of the farms farmed in the US are family owned and operated just like mine. So as the population has moved away from agriculture and had the opportunity to spend time, instead of spending time constantly worrying about their meals, we have taken care of that. They can focus on other things in the medical field and anything that they choose to do, because they know that they have food at any time at a very cheap, affordable rate. The food is always available to everyone in the US, and that's because this massive supply chains that farmers have developed is available. And so as information, as the gap has widened, as Ellie talked about, mistrust has filled that. And it's simply, I don't have the perfect solution on how do we link those two together. Today's infrastructure, technology, data, or the social media things that we have available, what better time to focus on that? But I think it's just simply because a lack of information, because so few people are with their hands in the dirt. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just, if I could just add a couple words to that. I think there's also an element here of science literacy and respect for the scientific organizations and what they're trying to accomplish. I think, we've seen lots of instances where individual groups, special interest groups have tried to intimidate scientists and science organizations. When I think back to Europe, it's really been the cradle of science over time. And all the great names have come from that area, and they're not always listened to today. And the same is beginning to happen in the United States. If we can align on some common scientific principles. And I would add to that as well that we need an innovation strategy globally for this, not just a specific activity, so that everything aligns. In the United States, for example, the USDA, obviously you've heard about our strategy, but we're working hard to work with the Environmental Protection Agency, the Food and Drug Administration, the other groups that have a role to play here, so that we're not just focused on what's good and what's bad, but what the strategy is to migrate toward a better place for that. But at the same time, bringing along and supporting farmers like Derek and his colleagues so that they're part of that along the journey. So I think, science doesn't solve the problems, but science can be the basis for ultimately providing the framework and the common facts and understanding for society to work towards those solutions.
Hello, everyone. This is Anthony Gilbert here. I'm with USDA. We've apparently lost our moderators, such as the perils of webinars these days. I'm sure Joao will be back with us shortly. But Anyway, this is an excellent discussion, and I just have one question, and I'm just sort of repeating what's in the Q&A box here. But there was a really good question, more for Pierre and Dr. Hutchins, about how will you as policymakers or as policy implementers be measuring the progress of sustainability and environmental measures that in the initiatives, Farm to Fork, Science Blueprint?
Thanks, Anthony. If I may start, I think, addressing this question. Maybe if I may, I would like also to say a word regarding, I think, the previous question that Joao raised. And well, in France or in Belgium, we call, I think, this phenomenon, I think, the agri-bashing, which is very regrettable. And I have to say, it's, in my view, I think this is linked to maybe a lack of communication, but also this is linked also to a society development. Is that now people, at least in Europe, live, but I guess all over the world, live increasingly in cities, with the increasing development towards urbanization, and there's a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge about agriculture, living in rural areas, and basically how food is produced. But I would not be too worried, because we 3 weeks ago, in the European Commission, we run what we call the Eurobarometer. So an opinion poll, asking a representative sample from European citizens about their views about agriculture, the role of farmers in society, the role of the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, and the public policy to support them. The result was extremely positive in almost all countries. So it's I wouldn't say that this is a marginal phenomenon, by far not, but I would not generalize too much. I think this I would say negative tone and what we can read or hear here and there. But in my view, it is clear that better communication, I think, will be absolutely fundamental. Better communication about, I think, the role of farmers and all the solutions that they can provide to all the key challenges which are making, I think, the political front page, I think, right now, about climate, about environment, etc., and about food availability. Regarding your question about measuring the impact of efforts towards sustainability on the environmental side, this is one of the weaknesses that we face in Europe. I don't know about the situation in the US, but it is clear that this is one area where we have started to invest quite massively, either under the research program, but also under the Common Agricultural Policy, since we want to collect an increasing level of information on the economic situation, but also on the environmental impact of the farming activity, so information about the soil, about the water quality, about biodiversity, and we want to do that at macro level using satellite imagery, and we want also to do that at farm level, because what is critical is to be able to link basically farming practice and changes in farming practice to what we see, on the ground in terms of natural resources. And this is something that we are going to develop under our network of 100,000 farms, network which is representative at EU level, in order to be much more precise in what we measure, what we want to achieve, and in order to better evaluate the policy changes that we are going to, that we are proposing. But it is clear that this is one of the, I would say, area where we need to further invest quite massively, at least in Europe. Thank you.
Yeah, Anthony, if I could just add on, I think that makes total sense. The only thing I would add to that is it's important that we measure outcomes and not just activities, right? So if we're measuring in the ag innovation area, we're going to stay focused on the 40 and the 50, but we have intentional consequences that are all going to be positive in terms of greenhouse gas emission, in terms of water quality, in terms of all these aspects that of course we'll be measuring, but we'll look at those as intentional consequences along those goals. And so, for example, banning anything is not an outcome. That's an activity. What we're looking for is, can we keep the water cleaner? Can we keep the soil healthier? Can we keep the greenhouse emissions low? And whatever it takes to do that, we'll be measuring that. But it's going to be focused on the outcomes and not the activities per se.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Joao is back, but he's suggested that perhaps I can close this out. I see that we're over time. I really want to thank all the speakers in this event, Dr. Hutchins, Pierre, Ellie, Derek, and of course, Chairman Linz and also Undersecretary McKinney. We think this was an excellent first start in terms of a transatlantic sustainability dialogue. We plan to have more, and we really appreciate from USDA, our partnership with Farm Europe, and we appreciate all the participants today, and stay tuned for more events forthcoming. So thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon or morning or wherever you may be. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day in the US.
Bye.